Welcome to Gearbox Centre. This is an interview with the main man himself. So, do you want to introduce yourself?
My name's Brendan. I'm the owner of the Gearbox Centre and have been for nearly a decade now.
So, how did you get into the gearbox rebuilding business?
I didn't pay attention at school, if truth be told. Yeah, it's kind of by mistake, really. My dad had a company that used to sell gear components. So if you needed an internal gear, a gear train, a core, my dad used to supply to people like me. So over a period of the years, you go to work with your dad. As I got older, you start stripping bits, separating metals, would then do the deliveries to the other gearbox companies, all his customers, because we didn't send much out by courier back then. It was get in a van, go and sell it, meet people, and take checks.
Checks, old school.
Yep. And I remember the first time I tried to fill out a check. That was interesting. So we done that. The unit next door to where Dad was available became available. We then put a ramp in it, and Dad became my supplier. And then we grew from one ramp to over across 3 businesses now. I think we've got 20 ramps.
Nice, good bit of expansion.
Yeah. So after we started growing, Dad retired, and we kind of amalgamated his business into ours. So we've got quite a big core availability, and then also the ramps to do the work on.
A family business then?
It is indeed, yes, certainly. But he doesn't come anywhere near it now.
Well, I see him now and again.
Yes, and
good for an old story sitting in the office, isn't he?
Try and get him out the door as quickly as possible.
So, moving into the business side of it, obviously 3 branches.
Yep.
What made you expand to branches? Because obviously we're in Kent.
Yep.
All the way over in Torquay and Bournemouth.
Yeah, so the Torquay one is the first business that we actually purchased. So the previous owner was looking to retire, and probably for about a year or 18 months before that, he started buying parts off of us. So instead of doing the gearboxes himself, he would buy, say, like a valve body or a mech unit. And then one Christmas, as you do, we was on the phone having a rant about how tough the trade is and how bad it's getting. And he said, I wish someone would just come and buy it. I just think like that. And I said, go on then. And that is how it happened. So the first day I actually bought Torquay was the first time I'd ever seen the business.
Oh, really?
I'd never been there beforehand.
Just buying it blind, bit like Facebook Marketplace.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, could turn up, don't know what you're going to get. But I've dealt with Nigel from obviously the previous scenario with when I used to deal with parts with Dad, and obviously over the last 18 months buying our parts and whatnot. So yeah, it weren't really as bad as it seems, because in the industry you know what each other can do. And then obviously we bought Bournemouth. I think it's about 18 months after. And yeah, that's where we're at.
Nice. So looking at the business side of things, obviously with your dad supplying stuff, back then it was mainly manuals.
Yep.
You were doing. So the move into automatic, how you found that? How you found getting the equipment?
Tough.
Yeah.
Very tough. Yeah, we didn't really get into automatics heavily to begin with, because we were trying to find the right person to do it. And trying to find gearbox builders is tough, especially when it's a dying industry.
Yeah.
So the only way that we could do it was by having a go ourselves, really. So it was, to begin with, a lot of effort that went into the knowledge side of it, the training side of it, and the equipment that we buy as well. Obviously, we've got the valve body machine, the diagnostics equipment, and although they're both gearboxes, manuals and autos, it's completely different.
Yeah.
It's a completely different game. So we've been doing that again, not too long since we launched. So I would say we're quite experienced in it now.
Nice.
Yeah.
And then the CVTs.
Yeah.
Obviously a complete different challenge in their own.
Mm-hmm.
How is it going with obviously getting parts and?
Yeah, so fortunately we've got quite good parts suppliers, and obviously from previous connections we've got a lot of good core providers as well. So what you tend to find, not necessarily just CVTs, but gearboxes in general, when new ones come out, the manufacturers won't release as many of the parts as they should do.
Yeah.
And you have to go through quite a big pain barrier before you start to get a steady flow of what fails. You have to go into like a research and development mode. What points on this are going to fail? how can we get supply? So then that way you know how to do your pricing. And then also you can be reliable for the customer. Because if you say to them, yeah, we're going to take a week, and then you can't get the parts at all,
Yep.
you look a bit silly.
Yes.
Yep.
So now the fun side of things then. What's your favourite gearbox to work on?
Classics. 100% classics. Not so much because of the gearboxes, but because of the story that comes behind them. So I like getting involved with something that's a hell of a lot older than me, that's possibly already been a part before in a previous life. Someone's rebuilt it before. An old cogger, as they call themselves. But yeah, I like the story behind it. So we had one come in not so long ago, and she was brought to school. I think it's in Austin. I can't remember what it was, but she was brought to school in this car as a kid.
Yeah.
And now she takes her grandkids to school in it.
Cool.
So she's had the car throughout them generations, and they were not parting with it. And we done the gearbox on it. We done a clutch on it. It's just cool.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'd much rather go to Goodwood Revival than Goodwood Festival of Speed.
Yeah. What's the worst gearbox you've worked on?
The worst for being complex and complicated, possibly.
Complex, complicated, just wouldn't work afterwards, just no matter what you did.
So the one for taking it apart and putting it back together and then not being able to get bits and then being able to get bits. Audi R8, that was quite a tough one, quite tricky. You've got 3 gearboxes built into one, so you've got a bit of an OAM, a bit of an OB5. But yeah, probably that one. Something that you don't see a lot of can be tricky sometimes, but it just gets you back to, like I said, that research and development phase, finding out what goes wrong with them, where you can get your part supplies.
Self-learning and self-teaching.
Yeah, and sometimes they can be good because you get new contacts as well because you find new suppliers.
Yeah, definitely. So with part suppliers, how are you finding it with having to go, some you have to go main dealer?
Yeah.
Some you have to, obviously you can get from other part suppliers.
Yeah, so since COVID, and everyone used that as an excuse, but since COVID, trying to get hold of parts from a main dealer is very, very tough. Everything's on back order with no ETA. Yeah. So then you're dealing with a customer and you're trying to tell them, we can get a hold of it, but I don't know when.
Yeah.
Okay, well, that's not very good for me fixing my car.
No.
So then you have to be creative. Can you make the part? If it's something that you can fabricate, can you find an alternative option? So if there's good used core out there, can you take it from that and repurpose it? So yeah, getting a hold of parts can be very tricky, especially when we're an industry that possibly shouldn't be operating, because not a lot of manufacturers like you taking apart their gearboxes. So if you buy a BMW, a manual, for example, there's no internal parts listed.
No.
So you can't get a part number. You can't go and buy it. So that's when the aftermarket kick in. And the aftermarket are really good for coming up with solutions. Same with Volvo. If you go to Volvo, gearbox is just one part number, no internal parts. So again, the aftermarket are really, really important to the automotive industry for us.
So what are you looking to do this year with the business?
It's a tricky one because obviously you've got a lot of incoming hybrids, electrics, and you've got new gearboxes coming out onto the market. So there's 10 speeds coming out. There's been 9 speeds for a little while. So it's more continual development. And I think that's what differentiates us from other businesses possibly, is we don't sit on what we've learned, and we will make mistakes in order to learn, and we're not afraid to do that.
No.
So I think possibly just upskilling the workforce, especially the guys on the phone, dealing with the phone calls. If you ring and the guys downstairs answer, you almost feel like you're talking to a technician when you speak to some of them.
Yeah, they are very knowledgeable.
They've been here long enough. They know exactly what they're talking about. And it is such a specialist skill that you can only kind of learn it over a period of time.
Yep.
There's no crash course that I can give someone on the phone to deal with certain issues. You can train people mechanically on how to take stuff apart and put it back together, but the diagnosis side of it and speaking to someone about it, that will only come with experience.
So talking about the guys downstairs, obviously you have the sales team who speak on the phone.
Yep.
Then you have the guys in the workshop. How are you dealing with keeping that friendship going without it being an us and them situation?
First of all, I think you've got to recruit the right people. If you have people with that mindset, which we have had in the past, and people that work in garages will know, they hate the pen pushers, and the pen pushers hate the people out there that do the grunt work. If you get people involved in a common goal, which we do here, and everyone's rewarded in the same way, I think that works very well for people being able to collaborate with each other. We also use the system a lot, so we don't like conversations in hallways because that's when people start blaming people. So I told you to order that part. No, you didn't. Yes, you did. And it can go on forever. So if it's not in the system, you never said it.
Yep.
And I think putting clear boundaries in there like that stops problems.
Yep, definitely. So out there we've got Roger, who is 60 something, doing manuals, and Dan doing autos. How are those two collaborating to obviously the extensive knowledge that Roger's got, and then Dan obviously building automatics?
Yeah. So Dan's been with us a little while now, and the problem with gearboxes, especially Roger, is like you say, he's been doing it for quite a while. Tomorrow a gearbox will come in and it might still be something that he's never seen before.
Yeah.
So the problem isn't with the experience. Obviously, it's great to have experience, but if you've got that problem-solving skill set and that problem-solving brain, that's where you need to be.
Yeah.
Because you're never. This isn't a job where you go, "I've completed it."
No.
It's constantly evolving, and you've got to be okay with not being okay sometimes.
Yep.
And I've seen a lot of people come into this to try and train to do it, and they're not comfortable with not knowing.
Yeah.
And as long as you're getting there and you know the fundamentals won't change, but how something operates 15 years ago might have been hydraulic, now it's switched to electric.
Yep.
And then you've got to understand how them two systems speak to each other. As long as you've got that skill set over a period of time added with experience, you'll be okay. But patience is probably the biggest key.
Yeah.
If you're not a patient person and you're hot-headed.
I've seen both of them down there toiling away at trying to get something to work the way it should rather than the way it's actually not working at the minute.
Yes.
So, right, well, I think that wraps up our first interview with Brendan. So, hope you enjoyed, and like and subscribe. We'll be coming back with a few more.
Thank you very much.